said, "What's your favorite book?" And he said, "War and Peace always makes me cry when I teach it." And I thought, well, that's funny. I've never heard of that with a book. I mean, I love books. I love to read. But I've never really had a book that made me cry. A book feel like I punched in the stomach and other things. But I never really cried at a book. So I thought, sure, I'll read it. And I found this in a bookstore. There was a movie about Tolstoy called The Last Station, about Tolstoy's death with Peter O'Toole and Helen Mirren. And I thought, this must be the moment. So I went to a bookstore. I counted the number of chapters. There were 365 chapters. And I read a chapter a day for a year. Actually 15 months. I left it in a Thai restaurant. I couldn't find it for like 3 months. Kind of went on a trip, had surgery, got sick. But anyway, about 15 months, I read this book. So this is part of that journey. I decided to do a one-person show to let people know how much I love this book. And so I decided to write it, and I started writing it, and then I was like, that's impossible. This is completely frigging insane. And about a week and a half before the show was supposed to open, I came up with this idea. So I hope you'll play along. There are 15 books. We haven't rehearsed this, so I'm hoping this stays up. Oh, okay. We're gonna make it happen. There we go. So there are 15 books. I really want to make this wide open for you. Okay. Screw it. So, yeah. And I've taken moments from each of the books that are moments that kind of illuminate, tell the story. And so what I need from you is to call it a number, and that I will tell the story. Now, I've given myself 60 minutes to do this. That's 4 minutes a book. We also have a darkroom timer here, which I will set for an hour. And our lovely sound engineer will be giving me warnings every 4 minutes. So it's a race against the clock to tell you one of the greatest stories ever told. With technical excitement. Okay. Anything I'm forgetting to tell you? It's 59 minutes, actually. Pray for me. We ready to go? Okay. And number 4. By the way, when we get toward the end, I'm probably going to have to go in order. It just doesn't make any sense. Natasha at dinner. So, Natasha is a character we meet in the first books. Here are the big characters that we're going to be worried about most of the time. Natasha, she's 13 years old. Pierre, he's in his late 20s, early 30s. Andre, he's in his late 20s. These are people we're going to have to wonder about through the whole book. We're going to be following them. They're like the 3 main characters. Natasha's 13 years old. She's incredibly precocious. She loves everyone. She's very excited about everything. She's having a little bit of an affair with this boy named Boris, who's 17, that she wants to kiss her. And he's like, hold on, in 4 years, I'll propose marriage to you. And she's like, okay, great. There's a big party happening. It's very exciting for her. So she goes into the party, and there's this woman, Maria Dmitrievna. Think of Pat Carroll, like big, stern woman. And she sees Natasha's father, the Count, the Rostovs. Now, Natasha's one of the Rostovs, and the Rostovs are Nikolai, who you'll also meet, who's also very important, is her older brother, who's going to be going to war, and Sonia, who's a cousin, who Nikolai is in love with. There's a lot of love happening in this book, as well as the war and the peace. And so there's a big party. The Rostovs have a lot of dinners. I think this dinner is for something like 150, 200 people. And it's Natasha's birthday party, and she's very, very excited. And she sits across from this guy named Pierre, who kind of makes her feel funny. And she's like, he's really hysterical. He's this really big, oafish guy, and makes her feel kind of funny, and she dances with him. And her mother makes her go up and ask him to dance, and he says, I'm kind of clumsy, but they dance together, and it's super wonderful. Let's go back to the beginning. So the first people we meet Pierre, who's this big, oafish guy, like I said. Think Ken Howard. God, I am dating myself with these references. Oafish, large, oafish, Vince Vaughn. And yes, so of course he was played in the movie by Henry Fonda. Don't see that movie. It wasn't very good. If you're going to see a movie, see the Bondarchuk movie from 1967, made in Russia. It's 8 hours long, but it's pretty fantastic. So there's Pierre. We also meet Prince Vasily. He has a beautiful daughter named Helene, who is the belle of society. And we find out that Pierre's father, Count Bezukov, Pierre is a bastard, and his father is about to die, and everybody's wondering what's going to happen with the fortune. We also meet Prince Andrei, Tom Cruise. Just think Tom Cruise. So he's kind of sturdy, short, serious. He and Pierre are good friends. We also meet Andrei's wife, Lisa, who has a charming little mustache, because women had mustaches in the 19th century in Russia. And she makes all the men just feel better about themselves just by being in the room. So Andrei meets Pierre. Pierre meets Andrei for dinner. Andrei says, never get married. It's awful. I'm leaving for the war. I don't care if my wife's pregnant. I'm not happy. I'm leaving. Don't ever get married unless you're sure there's nothing for you ever in life ever again. He's a little bitter. His wife comes in. They have a moment. Ugh. So Pierre tells Andrei that he's not going to go. He is not going to go to this big party. So there's a guy named Anatole, Vasily, who you met earlier, Vasily and Helene. His other son is named Anatole, who's a ne'er-do-well. Every time you hear that name, Anatole, you can hiss. Thank you. Anatole's awful. Think of whoever you want to think is awful for Anatole, but he's very dashing. So Pierre says to Andrei, I'm not going to go to this party. Andrei says, you're better than that. You don't need to go drunk and be carousing. And Pierre leaves Andrei's at 1 o'clock in the morning, and he thinks, you're right. I am better than that. But then again, we might... Oh, wow, that's a new one. I usually just get a little beep. This is the beginning. We're going to spend a little time on it. So Pierre says, you know what? We might die tomorrow, and then my promise would mean nothing. I'm going to go anyway. So he goes to this party at Dolokhov, another awful guy who promises everybody that he's going to sit in a windowsill, drink a bottle of rum without taking it from his lips, over a third-story window, and he won't fall into concrete. It's a really incredibly dramatic moment. He's standing like this, and he's drinking the beer. And Pierre says, I want to do that, and everyone's like, not such a great idea. So they all go to the actresses. I guess kind of the whorehouse or something, I don't know. Pierre's father dies. I'd spend a little more time on this, but we're rushed. Suffice to say, it's a really beautiful deathbed scene. There's a moment they're uncomfortable. There's a woman, she signs papers. She gets the fortune for Pierre. And she tells everyone how the death was touching, yet instructive. Now, Andrei, who we've met earlier, just quickly, Andrei has a sister named Maria, who's also very important. Maria is incredibly devout, and she has very large eyes. Tolstoy says that the eyes were more attractive than beauty, but she's not very pretty. But she's incredibly devout, and she tells Andrei that you know what, if he just pray for happiness with his wife, that he could love her because God would give him the love that he's not feeling for his wife. And Andrei says, yes, well, there's always that. Book 2. 3. Oh. We'll do 1 later. There's another chance. Oh, Jesus. So there's a lot of war happening. We're at war. Book 2 is all about war. Andrei's now at war. It's kind of war and disillusionment. Very complicated, but just to top line it for you, there's the Russians, the Austrians. We've lost Schönbrunn, which is a huge palace in Austria. I don't know if you've been there. It's in Vienna. It's very beautiful. I went once. It was enormous. I couldn't believe how many rooms there were. But anyway, it's been lost. So the Russians are at war. Andrei, who at the beginning of the book, Andrei meets these men. The Germans have lost a lot of men too. And there's a general, and he has a little bruise on his forehead. And this guy says, hey, nice job out there, basically. But they've lost like 40,000 men. And Andrei is like, and he gets really angry. The guy's name is Zhirkov. Not kidding. I love it. So he's being a Zhirkov. And Andrei is like, you know what? He says to another friend, he says, you know what? That's fine for him, but it's not fine for you. We either rejoice in our common successes and grieve in our common losses, or we are nothing. So that's the kind of guy that Andre is. I should have something more high-tech. So also at war is Nikolai. Now everybody loves Nikolai. We met Nikolai a little earlier, but here to really meet Nikolai. He says to a German, he meets some German farmer who's just baling his hay. And the German says, "Schön, guten Morgen, good morgen." And Andre says, "Yes, it is a good morning. Long live the Tsar, long live Germany, long live everyone." And they smile at each other because everybody loves Andre. And we meet this guy, Denisov, who has a little bit of a speech impediment. He says his R's like G's. And one of the things that I love in this book about the Russians in general is they call each other dear heart a lot. Like, I guess, caro in Italian. But they say dear, he says that this guy Denisov says dear heart, Rostov. He's a little bit of a character. And he comes in and he and Nikolai are very good friends. And he has a little money stolen from him. Oh my God. And, but the battle part of it is, which is very important, is that Andre meets this guy Tushin, who is a short little colonel. He has no shoes. There are a lot of cannons. Cannons, can I get cannons? So Tushin is standing in the cannons, kind of incredibly back at Andre sees how many people he's lost. And at one point, overture. That's not, forget that. But the cannons to him sounded like the sound of someone breathing. So Tushin will become a little important later on, but Andre goes to bat for him because he's lost 2 guns, and Andre goes to bat for him with the generals when they're like, "Why did you lose 2 guns?" And Andre said, "This guy is the reason that we won the battle in the first place." Now here's a really quick thing, and I'm going to go, this is very important. So Nikolai's in battle. They're all very excited. This is the 19th century. Everybody's very excited about war. So Nikolai is in war. His first battle, he's on his horse. Ouch. He gets shot. Suddenly his arm feels incredibly heavy. He's like, "What's happening? What's happening? I don't know what's happening." And suddenly he realizes the French are coming for him. And he's like, "Wait, what? Me? Everyone likes me. Why would you want to kill me?" And he kind of freaks out and he just throws his gun at the Frenchman and runs away. Now somehow when Tushin and Andre are coming back in the caravan, they see Nikolai and Nikolai's bleeding. He says, "Please give me a spot." And Nikolai goes into the caravan and ends up sitting by a campfire at the end of the book, wondering what's going on. And Andre's had that moment with the generals where they were going to give this guy a hard time when he actually did a really wonderful, wonderful thing. And they're both like, "Oh, this isn't what I thought it was." And they're already disillusioned, and it's only book 2. Book 3. Oh. So Helene, remember her? I mentioned her earlier. She's incredibly beautiful. She's really, really beautiful. She's incredibly beautiful. And her father is also the father of Anatole. Exactly. So the fruit doesn't fall very far from the tree. Surprise, surprise. She's suddenly very interested in Pierre, who has millions and millions of dollars. And somehow, they end up married. And Pierre, who's this kind of oafish guy, is sitting talking with Helene. He doesn't really know what's going on. And suddenly Vasily bursts in and says, "Well, congratulations." And he's like, "I guess that happened." And now he's married to Helene. And Anna Pavlovna, who always has the disease of the moment, at the beginning she has the grip. She says to him, "Well, I would have stayed if it weren't for my migraine." So, Anatole, while Helene is marrying Pierre, there is another very eligible woman who needs to be married as well. And the father, Helene's father, is trying to fix this guy up with Maria. So they visit Maria. Now they have a crotchety father. Andre and Maria have a crotchety father. He's like, think crotchety person. I'm not thinking of anybody right now, but somebody crotchety. But you can tell he really loves his daughter. So she really, really wants to be married. She so completely wants to be married because, but at the same time, she sits around and thinks about what an awful, horrible person she is because she is Catholic and she believes that she was born a horrible, loathsome person. So it's horrible that she even wants to get married, but she does, and she doesn't know. Well, they have a woman living with them named Julie Corrigan, who is a friend of hers, and they're trying to get Maria ready, and Lisa, Andrei's wife, are trying to get Maria ready for Anatole, and they only succeed in somehow, thank you, making her even less attractive. She also blotches up when she's nervous, so she's blotchy and unattractive, and she meets Anatole, and she's, oh, yes, but luckily, she goes into the garden. Oh, thank you. And they're in the garden. She sees Anatole and Julie kissing. And she does something so self-sacrificing. She says, well, she must love him so much. I must see that they are married, and I can't marry him. I know. And her father walks over to her and squeezes her hand really hard and puts his forehead against hers and makes her yelp because he's so excited. Okay, we'll skip that one. Oh, actually, you know what? Nikolai sent a letter home to the Rostovs. It's really great. The mother tells everybody about it. The Countess, she has 12 children. She's 45 years old. She's probably pretty exhausted. That's all I can say about her. But she is so excited about Nikolai's letter. And they have another sister, Vera, who's kind of like, who was the daughter in The Munsters? Marilyn, the one who didn't quite fit in? Vera's like that. So while everybody's crying and saying, oh, Nikolai's okay, and they're crying, and she's like, well, why are you crying? He's fine. And the mother looks at her and thinks, where did you come from? But she reads the letter to everyone, and then they send Nikolai $6,000, 6,000 rubles, in a package addressed to Russian guards abroad. So we're going to hope it gets to him. Now, Nikolai meets the emperor. The emperor's a really big deal. Now, imagine, if you will, feeling this way about your president. He would love to kill for the sovereign, but not only kill, but bring the prisoner before the sovereign and slap him in the face. And that's how he felt. He really feels like it's a moment like he is seeing God when he sees the sovereign go by, and he just gets excited. It's like, I think the only thing that, it's like girls at a Beatles concert. That footage of people screaming, that's basically like anyone meeting the sovereign. Okay, we're short on time, and this is a really long metaphor. So Andre also, Andre gets shot. Actually, what happens is Andre is trying to capture the flag because this was 19th century war, which is very, bless you, did somebody just sneeze? Oh, it's okay. It's interactive. Kind of. It's kind of like capture the flag. So Andre gets the flag, but he is wounded. And he is lying on the ground. And Napoleon comes by. Napoleon was actually 5'8". He wasn't that short. But I guess it's just one of those things. He does not get away very well in this book, I'll tell you what. Tolstoy calls him like corpulent, like egotistical, anything that would make him seem just like awful. But he is writing by all the dead. And Andre is on the ground, and he looks over Andre and he says, "Voilà une belle mort." What a beautiful death. And Andre moans. Andre has a moan that he even thinks is pathetic. He surprises himself by going, oh my God, what the hell is that? But looking into Napoleon's eyes, Prince Andre thought about the insignificance or grandeur and about the still greater insignificance of death, the meaning of which no one among the living could understand or explain. He is sent to Napoleon's doctor with the other men, and somehow he gets this icon that his sister gave to him, which is like 100 pounds. Four. I'm going with the first one I hear. Thank you, Gary Cotty. So Pierre, poor Pierre, they're having a little homecoming thing for Nikolai, just a little homecoming banquet with 300 people. I don't know how the Rostovs do it. Actually, they don't do it very well because they're running out of money. They never have any money. But Count Rostov, who's that guy who just pulls up a chair and says, "How are you?" He loves to, thank you, he loves to, I don't even know where we are, he loves to, he just loves to welcome everybody. So they have a party for 300 people. Pierre is seated across from Dolokhov, and there's a rumor that Dolokhov is having an affair with Pierre's wife. So he challenges Dolokhov to a duel. By the way, just really quickly, when everybody goes into the banquet, Tolstoy says, and they go into the banquet room like rye shaken in a shovel, which I just love. So I'm sharing it with you. So, before this, Denisov has come back with Rostov. They've come back, and Natasha's at home. She's very, very excited to see Nikolai. And she comes up to her and she says, Sonia's so in love with you. Sonia's so in love with her. Sonia's so in love with you. I burned myself in the hand with a ruler to tell her how much that I loved her. But, for me, the feelings don't really matter. They just pass. But she really, really cares about you. Kind of a little crazy, but it makes sense in the book. So Nikolai sees Sonia, and their eyes met without any formality and gave each other a tender kiss. Her look asked forgiveness for daring through Natasha's embassy to remind him of his promise and thanked him for his love. His look thanked her for the offer of freedom and said that one way or another, he would never stop loving her because it was impossible not to love her. Difficult eyes. So anyway, Pierre's at the banquet with Dolokhov. He challenges him to a duel. Oh, they're going to have a duel the next day. Nikolai's not very excited with Pierre either. They've been doing a bunch of shots, which is here's what the Russians do. To you! Throw the glass on the ground. Guess who cleans up the glasses? The servants. And they're not really mentioned very much in here because everybody's a prince or a count, but I just kept thinking about all these people like, 300 glasses. Okay, let's clean another one. 300 glasses. Let's do another one. So they're doing that over and over. But Pierre and Dolokhov have a duel. Dolokhov has been many duels. He kills everyone. Everybody's terrified. Pierre somehow manages to shoot Dolokhov. Dolokhov misses him. And Pierre runs away. Now Pierre has a moment with Helene. And she says, you know what, I didn't have an affair, but if I were, I would have been justified, because anyone married to you should be having an affair. And he says, maybe we should part. And she said, and give me a fortune. What a horrible thought. And at the moment, there's a marble slab. Somehow, because I guess they just had marble slabs lying around. And Pierre picks up a marble slab, and he goes, I'll kill you, and swings at her with a marble slab. And then she freaks out, and then he throws it on the ground, and he goes, out! With this incredible amount of power, and she leaves. And then a week and a half later, he signs over most of his fortune to her and management of his estates. So, Andre, we think Andre's wounded, right? He's with the French. But actually, right at the right moment when his wife is just about to give birth, Maria hears warm boots, which is such a weird detail, because I don't know warm boots. Cold boots, I guess they sound different. But Andre, she hears warm boots, and Andre comes in just as his wife is giving birth. And so Lisa is giving birth, and she's in a lot of pain, and she bleeds a lot. And she gives birth, and then she has this look on her face saying, what have you done to me? What have I ever done to you? All I was nice to you. What have I ever done? And she dies. I know. There's a lot of death in this book too, by the way. Just FYI. And so she dies in childbirth. Andre's left with a son. Even as he and his father go up to the corpse, the look on the corpse says, what have you done to me? What did I ever do to you? Just leave that hanging there, I guess. Now we're back at the Rostovs, which is very exciting. Thank you. So Denisov is visiting the Rostovs, but this is such a great quote. I'm just going to read it to you. Natasha is in love with everyone. Natasha is in love. She goes to the ball. She's in love with everyone the moment she walks into the ball. And never had the amorous air in the Rostovs' house, the atmosphere of being in love manifested itself so strongly as during these festive days. Seize the moments of happiness, make them love you, fall in love yourself. That is the only real thing in this world. The rest is all nonsense, and that is the only thing we're taken up with here. And then Denisov does the mazurka, which I have the sound cue for, but I guess we're not going to do. It's running out of time. But anyway, something like that. Oh, there we go. I don't know if this is the mazurka. But Denisov is short. He's very short. But the one thing he is brilliant at doing is riding horses and dancing the mazurka. And so with Natasha at the ball, he suddenly becomes this huge, huge giant man. Woo! And he dances the mazurka. And then he proposes to her. Ooh, and that ruins everything. Because she's 16 years old. and she tells her mother that she's been proposed to, and her mother's like, that won't happen. And she says, but he's so nice, I don't want to disappoint him. And her mother goes, well, fine, you should be married by now anyway. But they refuse the proposal. Whole thing with Nikolai gambling, Dolokhov, losing a lot of money. But then everything's okay. Book 5. Oh, boy. Oh, this requires some backstory. First of all, now Helene's supposedly having an affair with Boris, the one who Natasha was with, but now, So Pierre's kind of at the end of his wits. Now there's a great, probably one of the most satisfying metaphors I've ever heard in a book. Pierre can't stop thinking about Helene, and it's like a stripped screw that he keeps turning, and it won't go out, and it won't go in, but he can't stop turning it. So amazing. So he becomes a mason. Now all I know about masonry is that the 3 important things are good life, moral character, and love of death. And 3s and 7s are very important. And there's a lot of masonry, I don't quite get it. But anyway, it's another thing that Pierre can feel that he's not doing well enough. Now Pierre visits Maria and Andre. There's a moment in the crib, which is really beautiful, with because we know that Andre, even though he's not raising his son, very much loves his son. And he is breathing heavily. The son is breathing heavily, and he's in his crib. And Maria comes in, and she sneaks in under the canopy. And they touch foreheads, and they wave their fingers at each other. And they have this beautiful moment over the child in the crib, wishing it could last forever. But it can't. So Denisov, meanwhile, has been taking food for his men because they don't have any food. And he has commandeered a lot of the food to take to his men. And because of that, he gets brought up on charges. And he ends up in a military hospital because he has a slight wound, and he goes there and he's really upset about it. And Nikolai goes and visits him, and the stench is horrifying. It's really, really awful. And Denisov just tells him how he is justified by stealing. But at the end, Denisov gives him a petition to the sovereign. And Nikolai goes and tries to give it to the sovereign, tries to give it to Boris, who is not taking it. And then he ends up giving it to a general, a kind general, who gives it to the sovereign. And Nikolai sees the sovereign, once again, that incredible sun, that light, that whoa, that's falling off the stage, that incredible light. And he hears the sovereign say, I wish I could do something, but the law is bigger than I am. Which doesn't make sense because he's the emperor. But either way, Nikolai has a moment and he says, well, fine. We're just soldiers. We're meant to die. That's what we do. If we don't follow orders, this whole thing falls apart. That's what our life's about. Fuck this. Book 6, I think we're going to do number 2. So Andre is now disillusioned. Andre has this horrible disillusionment, of course, because his wife has died. And he sees this oak tree on his property, a very large oak tree. And he thinks the oak is saying to all the saplings about it, oh, spring, haha, of course, but I've seen spring before. I know this all means nothing. Nothing means anything, and we're all just going to die. So that's what he thinks the oak says. So he goes to, oh, how are we doing? Okay. He goes to, he has to go to the Rostovs. And he is given a room. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning. And he is at his window. And this would be yes. And he's at his window. This is totally anachronistic, but go with me. This song was written later in the 19th century. But, forgive me. But he is at his window, and he hears above him these voices of 2 women singing. And then they stop. And he hears someone saying, it's such a beautiful night. Isn't this the most beautiful night you've ever seen? And another female voice says, oh, Natasha, come to bed. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. And Natasha says, oh, this is the kind of night that's so beautiful that you just want to pull yourself into a little ball and then roll up into the air and fly. Thank you. And just roll up into the air and fly. And Andre is so transfixed. He's hearing the skirts rustle above him, and he's hearing Natasha, and he is so quiet because he is afraid that if he makes a move, they'll know he's there. And he is captivated and in love. So wouldn't you know it, there's going to be a ball. And Natasha's at the ball. She's very, very excited. And she's standing with her mother. And she's so excited, and she wants someone to ask her to dance. She's almost crying. She's so excited. Why is no one asking me to dance? I'm so pretty. Why is no one asking me to dance? And then here on the other side of the room is Andre talking with Pierre. And Pierre says, Pierre says, why don't you ask my mentor, is not the word he uses, to dance. And so Andre says to the man he's talking to, there's a time for business, but now this is a time for dancing. And he walks across and he says, may I have this dance? The Countess says, I believe you know my daughter. He says, I'd love to. And he takes her out on the floor and they begin to waltz. Also, not 1805. It's not Disney either. They're so excited. They're so excited to be dancing. And Natasha immediately falls in love. And Andre proposes. Andre's father, of course, is against the marriage. And he bullies Maria because he's pissed off at Andre. And Andre's about to go to war. And he says they're going to have to wait a year until they get married, according to his father. And Natasha is 16 years old and incredibly impatient. And she's like, a year? Ah! But that's what they have to do. Book 6. We're going to go with 1. Like I said, the Rostovs are incredibly in debt. So, the Countess says, Nikolai is at the front, but she says, if you don't come here and help us with our debt, everything's done. We're going to lose everything. Everything's done. If you don't come and help us, we are completely sunk. So he comes back, and he starts to do something with the accounts, but of course the Countess is like, oh, but we can't forgive that debt. She's a really good friend. And the Count's like, well, he wasn't really stealing that much. We can't really fire him as house manager. And Nikolai finally goes, oh, screw it. I'm just going to go hunting. So he goes hunting because there is something in the Russian soul that in the particular kind of weather where the sky looks as if it's melting, that the Russian man must hunt. And he hunts with something like 130 dogs and 40 horses. It's completely bonkers. So they are hunting. They're very, very excited. At one moment, Natasha gets so excited that she shrieks, literally like, "Ah!" And that shriek in the book expresses everything that the men could not express, but would if they could. So figure that one out, because I can't do it for you. But when they're hunting, they go to visit an uncle. I can't really figure out as an uncle or like an uncle, but anyway, he has a little cottage. And he lives alone with Anisia Fyodorovna, who I think of as that woman in The Sound of Music who won the second place trophy in the singing competition, who just smiles and bows a lot. Anyway, she's coming in and out. And Natasha is there, and the hand comes in, and he plays the balalaika. I don't know if you've seen a balalaika. It's a triangle. I've never quite figured out what that is. Somebody took a lute and chopped it off, and it couldn't get through customs or something. And they're like, fuck you! So anyway, he has this balalaika. Natasha's so excited, she asked for this song to be played over and over. 100 times! At one point, the Countess says about Natasha, I feel like she just has a little something too much in her, that she's not going to be happy. But Natasha throws off her shawl and she dances a Russian peasant dance, even though her mother is French. She dances a Russian peasant dance, and everyone wonders how could this girl of a French mother know the Russian soul so well? And they have a wonderful time, and they go back home. And then it's Christmas! Christmas at the Rostovs. Thank you, Anna Cannon. Rim shot. So, Natasha's wandering around. She's incredibly unhappy. She's like, I can't wait an entire year. I want him to be here. I want him. And her mother's like, oh, okay. And she's wandering around just telling the servants to get things, like, get me a chicken. And, because they're going to sacrifice a chicken, get me a piece of chalk. So she sits down with her brother and she's like, don't you sometimes feel that life is just boring and leads to nothing? And it's not only obvious, but just boring? And Nikolai says, do I ever? I was at a dance for the regiment and I just left because I was bored and there was no point. Because this is what Russian children talk about with each other, I guess. And then the servant comes in and says, ma'am, your chicken. And he's like, I don't want it anymore. So somebody gets an idea that they're going to dress up in masquerade, and very, very fun. And so they all put on the girls put on little mustaches. Sonia draws on a mustache, and Natasha puts on a mustache, and they all get into the sleigh, and Nikolai drives the sleigh, and it's freezing outside, and he has snow caked on his eyebrows and caked on his beard, and he looks around, and they have snow caked on their face, and he can't tell who anyone is because they have little fake mustaches, and they're all covered in snow, and they're all laughing, and it's wonderful. Because that's life. It's awful, and then it's awesome. Awful, awesome. Thank you. And they go to a neighbor's house, and at the neighbor's house, Sonia somehow manages to go get some wood. Nikolai goes, and he heads her off at the, ooh, boy howdy. They head her off at the pass, they run toward each other, and they kiss. And he grabs her, and she has a mustache, and he's like, it's like kissing her, but it's not like kissing her. What's happening? Book 8. This is the point where we just probably need to go in order. Oh, so. Anatole, thank you. Helene, even awfuler. Basically, this is Dangerous Liaisons. I'll cut to the chase. Here's what happens. The Rostovs are visiting Moscow. They go to the opera. Helene is there. She sees Natasha and she says, c'est délicieuse. Now, Natasha is young, and unlike Helene, who has been varnished with the looks of 1,000 looks, Natasha is young and untouched, and Anatole decides that he loves her. Oh, it's awful. So she's staying with Maria Dmitrievna. She's staying with Maria Dmitrievna, and Pat Carroll, Ursula the Sea Witch. Does that help anyone? She's staying, but a good one. And she's staying with her, and she hatches this plan to run away with Anatole. And she writes Andrei a letter, and she breaks off the relationship. What is she doing? And Sonia runs to Maria Dmitrievna and tells her plan. And so Maria Dmitrievna goes, not in my house, and shoves Natasha in the room, locks it, heads off Anatole, calls Pierre. Pierre comes over and talks to Anatole and says, what are you doing? You are ruining this girl's life. And P.S., you're already married. He's already done this to a Polish girl. And he says, well, I really love her. He's like, you don't really love her. And here's some money. And he's like, okay, and leaves. He's so awful. And so Pierre goes into Natasha. Natasha is crying, and she's like, won't hear anything bad about Anatole. I know. But Pierre comes to understand that she didn't know what she was doing. And at that moment, he's just overtaken with love for her. And she's like, I'm ruined, I'm spoiled, I'm ruined for the rest of my life because I kissed someone. Times have changed. And Pierre says, no, if I could offer my hand to you right now, I would. And then he leaves. And he gets into his troika. Where to, Pierre asks himself, where can I go now? Not to the club or to pay visits. All people seem so pitiful, so poor in comparison with the feeling of tenderness of love he experienced, in comparison with that softened, grateful glance she had given him at the last moment through her tears. Home, said Pierre, throwing open the bearskin coat on his broad, joyfully breathing chest, despite the 10 degrees of frost. It was cold and clear. Above the dirty, semi-dark streets, above the black roof, stood the dark, starry sky. Only looking at the sky did Pierre not feel the insulting baseness of everything earthly compared with the height his soul had risen to. At the entrance of Arbot Square, the huge expanse of that dark, starry night opened onto Pierre's eyes. Almost in the middle of that sky, over Prechetinsky Boulevard, stood the huge, bright comet of the year 1812. Surrounded, strewn with stars on all sides, but different from them in its closeness to the earth, its white light and long raised tail. That same comet which presaged, as they said, all sorts of horrors in the end of the world. But for Pierre, this bright star with its long luminous tail did not arouse any frightening feeling. On the contrary, Pierre, his eyes wet with tears, gazed joyfully at this bright star, which, having flown with inexpressible speed through immeasurable space on its parabolic course, suddenly, like an arrow piercing the earth, seemed to have struck here in its one chosen spot in the black sky and stopped, its tail raised energetically, its white light shining and playing among the countless other shimmering stars. It seemed to Pierre that this star answered fully to what was in his softened and encouraged soul, now blossoming into new life. Book 9. I'm reading Roman numerals. I'm learning. 3. Where are we? Oh, okay. We got a ways to go. Oh, okay, France and Russia are at war. Okay, so Nikolai, this time he doesn't throw a gun at a Frenchman. I'm going to get this going here. Nikolai, is anybody else warm? It's just you. Nikolai now sees a Frenchman. He sees a Frenchman. The Frenchman falls off his horse and he has one foot in the stirrup. And woo! Oh, it's still running. Yes. They don't make them like they used to. So, the Frenchman in one stirrup. And Nikolai pulls out his gun, but then he sees the dimple in his chin and his blue eyes. And he thinks, I could know this man. They want me to shoot him? Why would I shoot him? He doesn't seem like my enemy. And he captures him and he puts him on a horse. And then he's given a medal. And he says, I don't understand anything anymore. Petya, who I don't think you've met yet, but Petya is Natasha and Nikolai's younger brother. He was 9, now he's a little older. He wants to go to war, he's very excited. He also goes to see the Tsar. Now these scenes of seeing the Tsar are kind of amazing because we don't have anything like this. But he waits all day to see the Tsar. He almost gets trampled on, completely trampled on, which is not funny. But he's set up on a cannon. And eventually he gets to see there, he waits all day, and at some point the Tsar comes out just to look at the people. And a little crumb of his biscuit falls off. And people lunge for it, and he says, oh, I could give biscuits to people. And he starts throwing biscuits off the balcony, and people are racing for them, and Petya gets one of the biscuits, and he's so excited. End of story. So Pierre has this thing where he is adding up Napoleon's name with numerical values, and it adds up to 666, which is something that you can do, I guess. Now, Pierre really wants to be important, and so he keeps trying to add up his name to equal 666, but it doesn't. But finally he figures out if he takes the E off of Larousse, makes it Larousse, and changes the last spelling of his name, taking out one letter, it will add up to 666. Oh my God, something important is going to happen. Because that's how Pierre thinks. So Natasha, this whole thing with Andre, she's awful, she's sick, she's not feeling well, she prays she gets better. Book 9. Book 10. Well, 1, let's just go with 1. Okay. The old prince, Andre's father, Maria's father, is senile and he dies. and Andre is late to arrive. There's a really beautiful moment with he and his daughter where they kind of understand that he really loves her, and he goes and asks her to put on her white dress. And she puts on her white dress, and she comes back, and the servants say, "Don't go in there." And she goes in, and she screams because it's just a body there and not her father. And that's sad. So at this point, Moscow kind of being deserted by everyone because the French are pushing forward. And so they have this, thank you, they have this, okay. So they have this, like I know what's going to happen. Anyway, there are a whole bunch of peasants. Here's the thing we haven't gotten into, but these households were enormous ecosystems. So if something happened, like let's say the Rostovs run out of money, it's everyone. There are hundreds of people who work in the house and hundreds of people on their land, and they're all SOL. And that's the way this worked. It's kind of like Microsoft going down or something. So, that's a good metaphor. Anyway, it's like, ooh, Microsoft. Anyway, Maria's trying to get the peasants to leave because it's no longer safe here. And they're like, you know what? Your brother gave us our freedom to have our houses. We're not going to give that up to follow you. But you know who races in to save the day? Nikolai. Oh. And he whips them into shape because he's a good master. Oh. So Pierre loses a game of cards and decides to go in the army because that's what Pierre does. He also wears a giant green robe and a white hat on his head and walks down the street, and people look at him funny, and he's like, what's the problem? What? Lives in his own world. You gotta love him. Oh, that's about an icon. We can skip that. Anyway, the Russians were incredibly devout. Everything stopped. The icon came on. Everybody bowed to the icon because that was how war worked in the 19th century. Oh. So Pierre and Andre, it's the evening before the Battle of Borodino. It's an incredibly important battle. And Andre is very heated. And he's like, you know what? War is a lie. We shouldn't take prisoners. We should just kill people. Because this is BS what we're doing. And then he says, I know too much. Because what happens next, because he knows a lot, is that Andre is in battle, and a shell lands next to him, and everybody expects him to get down, and he looks at the shell, and he's like, is this it? Is this the moment that something happens? And boom, the shell goes off, and he is hit. He is hit in his side, which is really horrible, and the doctor finds him, they give him surgery, and there's this beautiful moment, because this was the 19th century also. They didn't know what happened, thought he might die, and he comes out of this reverie, and the doctor is kissing him on the lips, as if to say, I've done what I can. And there's a lot of affection between the men, which is really sweet in this, where they're like, this means a lot, and death is important. And, oh no, I threw the card away. Oh, yes. So, Anatole. So Andre's in the hospital, and he hears someone screaming horribly. And he sees this man, and he looks over, and this man is clutching his own leg, which has just been given to him. And it's Anatole. And at that moment, any horrible feelings he had for him just disappear. It's really beautiful. Okay, let's keep going. So, Tolstoy has this whole theory of history. I don't know if I should get into this, but anyway, it's a large part of the book. So about these kind of irresistible events that history seems larger than any of us. Like this is a book that takes 7 years and tries to condense it and say, here are all these things, and they all affect each other, and we all think that one person does this thing and this happens, and one person does this thing and this happens, but it's just not true. You cannot make things happen that way, that large movements happen, that things sometimes feel like they should or were forced to happen. With this one, Helene decides to convert to Catholicism because she doesn't want to be married to Pierre, but she wants to get married to somebody else. So she thinks if she transfers, like class, I'm going to transfer to Catholicism, 101. So if she converts to Catholicism, that her first marriage is then null and void and she can get married again. Isn't that amazing? Helena's also this person that Tolstoy says, by the way, if you are physically really beautiful in this book, you do not get off very well. Because Helena is like, she said people actually think she's smart because she's pretty, and she just kind of says things, and people are like, oh, that's deep and interesting, but actually she's the most incredibly not deep person ever. So Moscow is now burning. Natasha is helping with the wounded. They're being brought into Rostov's courtyard, and one of the wounded who's brought into Rostov's courtyard is Andrei. Oh. Now, Sonia knows this, and she tells the Countess, should we tell Natasha? And the Countess says, I don't think so. But, there's no way they can keep them apart. And Natasha sees Andrei. Andrei is going in and out of, there's a whole bunch of stuff here. Okay. There's a whole bunch of stuff here about God and about his heart is opening, and he is saying, I love my enemies, and there's this universal love, and it's all about love, and it's like his heart is expanding, and he's lying on his deathbed, he's lying on his bed, and he is going in and out of consciousness, and there's a fly, he's creating the structure, and the fly keeps buzzing around and batting on his nose, and at one point he thinks, I wish I could see Natasha, and he looks over and she's there, and then he realizes it is her. And she says to him, I'm sorry for what I did. And he says to her, I love you now more than before. And the doctor comes in and says, what are you doing here? And she runs out of the room. But then from that point forward, they spend every day together. So Pierre gets a gun to kill Napoleon, as one does, because he's super important. But on the way out of Moscow, buildings are burning, and there is a child. He passes a husband and wife. I love this about Tolstoy. So Moscow's burning, all this stuff's happening, and you pass this couple, and the husband is yelling at the wife for being annoying. It's like, what are you doing? And she's like, my child. He's like, So Pierre goes into a burning building, saves the child, and the child is just as annoying as the mother. Amazing. But since he stops, the French arrest him because he has a gun and he's going to kill Napoleon. Helene's dead. She dies of the problem of two husbands, which means that she went to an Italian doctor to take care of, because that was something that happened. I mean, she was still awful. Shouldn't have died she was awful. So Nikolai is realizing maybe he has some feelings for Maria. Could happen. I'm not going to ruin anything. But he talks to a governor's wife that he's flirting with somewhere, because there's always some. That's the other thing about this book. There are over 600 characters. Thank you. And so there's this governor's wife, and she's really charming, and they're flirting. And he's like, oh, but I think I may love this woman, but I have this cousin that how am I ever going to do it? And she says, il y a manière. There are ways, and there are ways. They all speak in French, by the way, because the Russians spoke in French. And large chunks of this novel are in French and in German. I can only write in one language. So here, near the end, one of my favorite characters in this book. And you're like, really, Tolstoy? We're at page 969, and you're going to introduce another character that I am completely in love with. So Pierre has seen this horrible execution, which was actually based on Tolstoy's own experience of seeing an execution, of these French soldiers executing someone that he can tell they don't want to do, and they are aware that they've just done something awful, and they kill 5 men and throw their bodies in a pit, and it is horrible. And Pierre thinks, why bother? What's the point of anything? It's all shit. And, well, okay, I can't find that page. I marked it earlier. Live theater. So there's that's heavy. So he goes back to the camp, and there's this man, and he notices this man is taking off his little foot wraps and hanging them up one at a piece, and he also notices this smell of sweat, And the man says, "Oh, little falcon, you suffer an hour, but you live an age." And he says these wonderful little things. He calls everyone little falcon, and he talks about his family, and his name is Platon Karateev. And he is this wonderful little person of light that Pierre meets. And there's a beautiful moment with the French soldiers where he has some little scraps. He's doing something for one of the French officers, and he wants to keep the scraps for his foot wraps. And the French officer's like, "Give me those scraps." And he's like, "But I want to keep them." And he's like, "Give me the scraps." And he gives him the scraps. And then he gives him the scraps back. He looks at them. He says, "You can have the scraps." And then Platon turns to Pierre and he says, "See, they're not that bad." And he is just looking on the bright side of everything. So Pierre is in captivity. And he's been marching. They march for days. They march until his shoes fall off, till there are sores on his feet, and he's in pain. And he's trying to find, like Platon, the bright side of things. And he sits down at one point, motionless, thinking after the long march. "The soldier wouldn't let me go. They caught me. They locked me up. They're holding me prisoner." Who, me? My immortal soul? Looking into the stars, all this is mine, and all this is in me, and this is me. And all this they caught and put in a shed and boarded up. And he starts to laugh hysterically because he can't keep him prisoner. So Petya, who you met earlier, is so excited to get in the army, and finally they put him in the army because he complains to his parents and he threatens to enlist, and he gets so excited. He meets this little drummer boy who he brings in named Vincent, and he brings him in and tries to feed him. And there's this beautiful moment where he wants to tell the drummer boy all these things, but he feels like he shouldn't, and he feels bad that he has money, but he wants to tell him so much. And instead he just grabs his hand and he says, "Entrez, entrez," and brings him inside and gives him some food. And the next day he gets on a horse and he gallops in front of everyone and he gets shot. So the French are retreating, but at this point Pierre is still prisoner. These long marches, and on these long marches he's thinking, we're so lucky. I can just think of anything and I cannot be here. It's like a pressure valve, and when the pressure builds up, I can just let it go. I can just pretend that I'm not here. And at one point he marches past Platon Karateev, who is sitting on a hill. And what the French are doing is if anyone lags behind, they're shooting them. And he sees Platon, and he sees Platon's little dog, who's purple, purplish. So anyway, there's a little dog that Platon has. It's very sweet. And he sees Platon's dog, and he's sitting next to him. And he walks past, and he says, "Oh, catch up." And he hears a shot, and he hears the dog bark. And he thinks, "What is that dog barking about?" And he keeps walking. And in the camp that night, Pierre recognized the purplish dog who was sitting by the soldier wagging its tail. "Ah, it's come. Ah, He began and he did not finish. In his imagination, suddenly, simultaneously connecting among themselves, memories emerged of the gaze with which Platon had looked at him, sitting under a tree, of the shot he had heard from that spot, of the howling of a dog, of the criminal faces of the two Frenchmen who had run past him, of the smoking gun in his hand, of the absence of Karateev at this halt, and he was ready then to understand that Karateev had been killed. But at the same moment, a memory emerged in his soul, coming from God knows where, of an evening he had spent with a beautiful Polish woman in the summer on the balcony of his house in Kiev. And still not connecting the memories of that day and not drawing any conclusions about them, Pierre closed his eyes, and the picture of summer nature mixed with the memory of bathing, of the liquid wavering ball, and he sank somewhere into the water so that the water closed over his head. So at this point, the Countess is a little wacky. Her husband's died, her son Petya has died, she's kind of going out of her mind, and Natasha has to care for her mother. And at this point, Tolstoy says, love awakened, and life awaken in Natasha. So Pierre is released. We're at the end of the war. Pierre and Natasha and Maria meet again. And they're talking until 3 o'clock in the morning. And the servants have to come in and change the candles. But they don't care. They don't even notice them. But they're talking, and Pierre tells them of his time. And he tells them how he even forgave his wife. And that they both had a part in what happened. And that all there was is forgiveness. And Pierre says people ask him if he would have captivity again or the life he had before, and he said 1,000 times captivity. Because we imagine that as soon as we are torn out of our habitual path, all is over. But it is only the beginning of something new and good. As long as there is life, there is happiness. There is much, much still to come. So, it's true, this book makes me cry. Even going through it to do this again, I cried. Thinking about it, I cry. Thinking about the ending, I cry. Thinking about one of the major things I didn't tell you about because I didn't want to cry makes me cry. And I love that it will be, my Platon Karateev, my Bald Hills, my Maria's People of God. We didn't get to them, but they're hysterical. And this book is about so much, and I love that he tried. Because, that's what we do. We fight, and we love, and we try to find meaning, and we fight, and we love, and we try to connect, and we fight, and we love, and we lose people. Read the book, and then we'll talk.